Well, I'd like to do a segment on corporate stamps. The stamps you're going to see are mainly mining stamps, some of them from Nixon and Wingfield, in the early mines of Goldfield. This one here is a stamp shaped like a lion, and it's from the Milltown Mining Company out of Goldfield. And it's a Nixon and Wingfield company. There's the stamp. These stamps are generally put in safes after they were used. It was kind of like a, kind of almost like a wax seal, you know, where it made that stock certificate legitimate along with the signatures. There's an early signature of George Wingfield. Nice stock. Here's a stamp that I made of the same. It shows the M very weak, and the M's very weak there also. It's amazing. This one here is of the Nevada boy, Goldfield Mining Company. And it's similar to the one from Milltown. And that's another Nixon and Wingfield company, very early. It was incorporated in 1904. And here's one of the original stockholders' minutes book, showing the directors. There's Tascarel Odie of Tonopah fame. And this was the first meeting, showing Tascarel Odie, George Wingfield. There's J.H. Kendall. And there's, at the bottom, George S. Nixon. That K.M. Jackson and that W.S. Booker were original backers of Stimler and Marsh, the ones that discovered gold at Goldfield in 1902. Another nice piece of history. This is a statement ledger from Nixon and Wingfield. Has a lot of statements, mainly between them, railroad invoices, certain mining invoices. It's a neat ledger. Here's a stock certificate ledger from the Milltown Mining Company. I think that was the first corporate stamp that I'm showing in this segment. But it's a nice shape. It shows all the stocks that were sold to the different names. Let's look under Nixon, see how many he got a hold of. There's George S. Nixon, right there. It looks like he's got 166,000 shares at $1 par. There's $166,000 plus his dividends. And then let's look under George Wingfield's. He's got a few more than Nixon. He's got 166,000 and then another 332,000 issued to him. It's amazing the amount of money that went through their hands during the boom period. I got checks that are almost $250,000 that were signed by Nixon and Wingfield. It's just amazing. the amount of money that they had. And pretty well most of it just generated from the Goldfield mines. Old Town Mining Company. That town of Milltown is just east of the Florence mine, in a little flat area just behind the mine. This one's a corporate stamp from Columbia Mining Company. And that's where Columbia Mountain is. Just west of town, northwest. Another Nixon and Wingfield property. One is from the May Queen Mining Company. Another Nixon and Wingfield property. This mine was situated right where the Consolidated Mill is. That's part of the May Queen mining property that was owned by Nixon and Wingfield, and they built the mill there on that little hill because they needed that gravity. They needed the angle of that hill for the mill. This would be a scarce stock certificate from Tonopah. But what makes this the rare is because it not only has George Wingfield's signature, but it also has George S. Nixon's. Look at that banker's signature. It was definitely a banker. But that's the only certificate that I have with both signatures, Nixon and Wingfield. That's a special stock certificate there. Even though it's from Tonopah, I had to show it because it has both men from Goldfield fame. Another corporate stamp from Goldfield. This one's from the Goldfield Hidden Treasure Mining Company, incorporated 1907. There was a lot of mines in Goldfield. A lot of them were generally made up for stock manipulation. But there were some that produced good early, but unfortunately the veins or lenses of ore were very shallow. So the mines would peter out fairly quick. This is kind of a neat stamp. This is from the L.M. Sullivan Trust Company, headed by George Graham Rice. If you've ever read the book, My Adventures with Your Money, that was his corporate stamp right there. And L.M. Sullivan was kind of a partner of his in crime, and he's the one that came up with the purse. He ended up going around in 1906 getting money for the purse of that Gans and Nelson fight in September 3rd, 1906. So he was one of the men that were trying to collect enough money for that prize fight, and they collected it. But this man, he later on went to prison for mail fraud. Nixon and Wingfield helped finally put the noose around his neck as far as getting him arrested, because he milked a lot of people out of millions of dollars through stock manipulations. And he's one of the reasons of the State Bank and Trust Company failing, because a lot of those loans were against his mining companies, and his mining companies were insolvent. So it brought the bank down. never to reopen. That was in 1907. The corporate stamp from the Goldfield Consolidated Mines Company. This was an incredible company. It was incorporated in 1906. And it was one of the very few mining companies that had their stock at $10 par, capitalized at $50 million. That was a lot of money. And what made this company very legitimate is it paid out $32 million in dividends to its stockholders in 11 years. So it was quite a company. Another Nixon and Wingfield company. This is the company that was the parent company to all the rich mines. The only mine it did not absorb was the Florence. And what's neat about that is Nixon and Wingfield offered Tom Lockhart in 1906 $4.5 million cash for the Florence mine, and he turned it down. Can you imagine that amount of money in 1906? Amazing. Well, this is the last corporate stamp I'm going to show in this segment. You notice that building? That was taken around the 1930s. And it's of the John S. Cook and Company Bank in Rhyolite. So that was John S. Cook and Company had a bank in Goldfield, Nevada, which he was cashier, and he was president of this bank. And it was gutted out in the late teens. They used whoever it was came in and took all the lumber out, which they did in most of the buildings there in Rhyolite, and left the shells. And this building is one of the most photographed buildings of Nevada. See if I get a better shot because of the light. But that was quite a building in its day. John S. Cook and Company Bank. And that's the only metal item that I know that exists from that building. And there's the stamp. I hope you like this segment.